Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
This show is brought to you by the Open to Hope Foundation as well as the Compassionate Friends. Why don't you introduce our guests today, because we're going to have a great discussion about men and grief.
Okay, I'd love to. So our guests today are Jim Giaccone, and so his brother's name is Joe, and Joe died in 9/11, and Jim now works with an organization called Tuesday's Children, and he actually he mentored two boys that lost a dad on 9/11 and has been working with these boys for many, many years.
Fantastic.
And as you know, recently, Jim was a finalist for NASCAR for the Betty Jane France Humanitarian Award. And he actually won $30,000 as a finalist and was able to give that back to Tuesday's Children. And then we're going to talk with Franklin Cook, and we've had Franklin on the show before. And he is a good friend of ours, and he is the founder of Personal Grief Coaching, and Franklin's dad died by suicide. And we're going to have another guest on that we've also had on before, Eric Marcus, and he is the author of Why Suicide, and he's a New York Times best-selling author, and his father also died by suicide.
Yes. Well, welcome to our show.
Hi, Jim.
Great to have you
Franklin,
on.
and Eric.
And Eric, wonderful to have you guys on, and we're going to be really interested in hearing about your take on men and grief.
I noticed that after September 11th, when I would speak of my brother to even my closest friends, and for different reasons, my wife even, I would see how uncomfortable they would become with the subject. So I stopped talking about my brother.
Wow.
And the Tribute Center gave me an avenue to have a voice. They gave me an outlet. There were people there that were there to listen to me talk about my brother, and it was almost like the sun was brighter. It was an amazing transformation.
So the Tribute Center is a place people can go and hear the stories of people that had someone die that day in the Trade Center.
Correct.
Is that right?
There's a few hundred of us volunteers that we take people on a walking tour around and on the September 11th memorial. And at the end of the tour, we usually give our personal person-to-person story. We can be rescue and recovery workers, we can be people that escaped the buildings, tenants surrounding the buildings, Red Cross workers afterwards. All of us come from a different, that was one major thing I learned also becoming part of the Tribute Center, was that I really was only looking at it as in tunnel vision of being a family member. And when I got down there, the breadth and width of the amount of people and how deeply and differently affected people was a big lesson to me. My brother went to work early on September 11th and he disappeared. This is the only place that we have for my brother. This is his memorial. There is nothing that has happened to me that I wouldn't have traded to have him back. I miss him terribly. My name is Jim Giaccone, and I've been a volunteer with Tuesday's Children for the last 10 years. I got involved with Tuesday's Children after my brother Joe was killed on September 11th, 2001. I am not a rich man, so I thought the most valuable thing I could give was my time.
Jim has been one of our most involved family members. He helps us out in so many different ways. He's gotten in-kind resources for us, helped plan programs, he's gotten venues for us, he's done marathons and triathlons, and he's instrumental in our mentoring program.
I thought by sharing my time with boys that were affected by September 11th, I would be sharing my brother with these boys also.
Jim has personified what we want a Tuesday's Children volunteer to offer.
I think this was a perfect way to make my brother live on. I think he would be proud.
Fabulous.
Wow. I
Well,
love that.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I'm just thinking, you two guys watching this, how would you have liked somebody like Jim working with you?
Exactly, right? I'm thinking that too.
When my dad killed himself, everyone scattered. There was nobody.
I could imagine.
Nobody. I was recently in a TAPS conference where there was a good grief camp,
And that's the Tragedy Assistance Program, right?
For
the
survivors,
military?
yes, they provide support to people who've lost loved ones in the military to suicide, accident, and combat. And over the course of this weekend, there's a camp for the kids who've lost parents or other relatives, and each child is matched with a mentor. And I was there to observe, and I saw these kids who were my age or younger, and they're each matched with someone from the military for the weekend. And I thought, what a wonderful thing for them. And also in the back of my mind was, oh, that would have been so wonderful to have as a child.
Trauma shared is trauma lessened, you know, as long as you're in a healthy setting, you know, to do that, to know just partly that you can survive it, partly somebody who's there, who has been through it, is just a model, an example that, yeah, there still is hope, because at first you have to see somebody make it. You don't believe you're going to make it.
When we talked to Franklin and Eric on a show previously, they said, you know, when you tell someone that someone's died by suicide, there's not a lot of support and people kind of don't want to talk about it. But you said something similar, which I was surprised about.
Well, people don't realize. I don't know if you call it etiquette or manners, or I've been, by good friends, introduced in new groups as Jim Giaccone, his brother, was killed on September 11th, and that's like, you know, you throw a blanket over any conversation that you could possibly think of. And the other thing is that I wouldn't bring it up, you know, in the beginning, I wouldn't bring it up. I wouldn't tell people that, because it would be like, you know, stabbing the conversation completely.
And is it
killing
weird to have, since it was such an international and national tragedy, is it weird to have that as part of your identity now?
That is become, and you know what, I've come to accept that as my identity now, because I you know, I'm here on the show. I'm with the boys 10 years. I got national recognition.
You're at the Tribute Center.
I'm at the Tribute Center, and it's all part of my way of coping and my way of healing, or every one of those aspects.
And I think for all of you, your way of showing the world that, look, you can not only survive but thrive eventually.
The Tribute Center gave me a voice. It gave me a place to be a participant.
Now, I know you guys work in the grief and loss area. Does that give you a voice?
Yeah, I would say for me, first of all, I really resonated with what you said about identifying with it, because since 1999, I have worked, you know, full time. I started as a volunteer, but I worked full time in the field. So whether I identify that's my identity or not, that is my identity from out there. That Franklin is a survivor of suicide loss, and I work with survivors and all that. So, but I'll tell you, I just also so relate to the importance of telling my father's story, of there being a place for that where it's welcome, of you know, he lives on. You said it as well as any. My father lives on through my work, and I love that.
I wrote about support groups. I wrote about the experience of suicide loss. My book is a question and answer book on everything around
Well, it's a
suicide
wonderful
loss.
book of a lot of great information.
Thank you.
Well,
about
I'm
suicide.
wondering if it was easier to give voice to it through writing.
It was.
Initially.
Yeah, it was, and I could interview people at a remove. And then when my sister-in-law took her life 8 years ago, which was nearly 40 years after my dad's death, I was so undone by it that I actually sought out a support group. Now, support groups aren't for everybody, and there are a lot of men for whom support groups are really the wrong thing. I've talked to men who benefit from one-on-one therapy. They don't like being in a group. But I really loved being surrounded, well, loved is the oddest way to put it, but it was such a comfortable place to be, surrounded by people. I went to one Survivor Day event. This is International Survivors of Suicide Loss Day. When I worked for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, I tried to go to a different one every year in a different place, and I was in Louisiana. And at this event, people had a meal before the program, and each person introduced himself or herself by saying, "Hi, I'm so-and-so, my son killed himself." It was so mind-blowing that here were all these people talking about, in such an open way, about their losses, and I felt like they are my people. I understand them in a way, and they understand me in a way that even my therapist couldn't understand, because he hadn't been through a traumatic loss.
It's a common bond that breaks down that initial wall that is up. So
Do you want to comment on the shock of hearing it? What happens for a guy?
I always liken it to a hatchet at the base of my skull. It felt like that.
And you were young though when your father killed himself.
Yeah, and I reacted the way many children do. I didn't cry. I didn't publicly anyway. And very quickly I was told that I was the man of the house, the man of the family, and I had to take care of my mother. So I was.
Didn't everybody get the message? Take care of your mother.
Yeah, everybody. Everybody.
Siblings get that message.
Yeah.
Be strong for your parents.
Of course.
Yeah, I became Switzerland between our families, and I filtered what was allowed through to the other side, just to try and keep the family together.
How about you, Franklin?
Yeah, the shock, to me, it just seemed like numb. Like absolutely numb. And it isn't that I didn't react emotionally or any of that, but really I couldn't tell you much about the first couple weeks, especially, and couldn't have told you even when I was closer to that time. It was a long time ago, but really, really numb, really a state of disbelief that the world is still spinning, basically. Is how it felt to me.
Yeah, it's almost like you feel like the world should come to a screeching halt.
Let me get tips for people that are watching this show.
Rub some dirt on it,
What do
get
they
back
need?
out.
What did you say?
Rub some dirt on it, get back out there.
You guys were saying earlier, buck up, right, or whatever.
Suck it up, walk it off.
Guys are supposed to do.
Yeah.
And it's for most guys, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
So you bottle it up. When I was 21, I was depressed and I couldn't understand why. And I decided, actually my mother said, you need to see a therapist, but she was afraid I'd kill myself. And I had no idea what it was about. And I went to the therapist because I just was so unhappy and I didn't want to be unhappy the rest of my life. 3 seconds in, we're talking about my father. And it was about that. And I think if you decide not to deal with it or if you simply can't, it will come back. And you'll wind up dealing with it in a way that's really messy, even messier than it might have been when you did it if you did it when you were young.
So your advice is get some help if you're
Get some help, whatever form it is.
Yeah.
A support group, one-on-one counseling, peer-to-peer, but don't do it alone.
Yeah.
You know what I love now too, if that's not the place for you, is you've got all these chat rooms, these private chat rooms, also on the internet that people can visit. And I don't know how you feel about those, but.
Well, so first of all, if you're going to go someplace online, I would recommend someplace like the Alliance of Hope, where it's a moderated board.
So that's Alliance of Hope.
AllianceofHope.org. But the fact is that 80 or 90% of the people who go there are women. The fact is that if you walk into any support group, and I've walked into hundreds of them, 70 or 80 or 90% of the people there are women. But I'll tell you, I just did a workshop for men at the TAPS conference in Tampa, and men need to talk to men. I think, like, I had a room full of men, 25 guys, and they could identify all these things that we drink at it or we hide from it or what, they all know how it works, but these guys are working on coming out of it. Some of them are very, very past all that, and just don't hide, don't isolate, don't drink at it. That's what I did, because that's accepted.
Michael and I did a men's grief group together a year ago, and it was extraordinary.
It was extraordinary.
Because it was the men talked in a way that they wouldn't. And they said, we would not talk this way in front of women. And it was true.
It was.
And they were open in a way that I found surprising and also very encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had it happen many times because I don't work with men, in an ambitious sort of way, but it happens to me a lot because here we are, and once you get them in the right place, they might still be reticent or they might do it in their own way or whatever, but they are for real. We are for real, once we get a place to talk about it.
And I'm wondering, Jim, have you had an opportunity to be in a group with other 9/11 families and talk
I've been
about
in
it?
multiple.
Okay.
About a year after, in about 2002, I found a support group, and it was good in the beginning.
One thing I like about the Compassionate Friends is for people who've lost children and siblings and grandchildren. And one thing I like about it is we meet the fourth for Monday in every month in our chapter in Redwood City. And it just goes on, and if people want to come once, they can
Yeah.
come. If they want to come twice, if they have an anniversary reaction, they can pop back in. You know, these pop-in
It's an
peer
open
support
group.
groups are kind of nice, because sometimes you don't always need, you know, to come back.
Yeah, I think everybody needs to find their own way, and I would say, especially for men, like, write about it if you don't want to talk about it, or build something, you know, build something with your own two hands that memorializes, or that your person would have liked to have been involved in, or whatever. It's
Well,
not
it's
about
interesting that
the thing.
It's interesting you're talking about the writing, because there's been research studies that have shown after traumatic loss that have been done with police officers, after traumatic loss, if you write about the trauma, there's something very therapeutic about writing.
Physically writing.
The
And
physical
not- yeah.
writing. And then they say take it and destroy it and throw it out, and you can keep writing your narrative in different ways. And it somehow purges it and gets it out of your system. Because, you know, with trauma, we can get stuck in that place.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, how did they die, and were they suffering, and what was that like at the end?
Well, we spoke about the tribute tours that I give, and when I tell my story, within the story, I tell the fact that as of September 11th, my wife had never seen me cry, and I would know her for 20 years up to that point.
Right.
And now I cry all the time. I allow myself to cry. It's just the new Jim. It is like something changed inside of me that day, and it took me 8 years to find that I was okay to cry, and I frequently cry now at happy things, sad things. I cried at
That's
Marley and Me.
interesting.
I cry all the time.
You guys are shaking your
Yeah,
head. Do you
it sounds
identify with that?
Absolutely.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I didn't cry for 20 years, and now I'm making up for it.
And Eric, you said the same thing. You said
that's
when your
exactly
dad died,
right.
you didn't cry, right? It was very private.
No, I didn't.
But now you guys, it sounds like,
Yeah,
are
at the
embracing
funeral,
your
I was the
emotions.
most stoic little boy, and I can see in my mind's eye now this little boy, and I think just how sad. You know, that there was no one there that I felt comfortable being that way with. But a lot of it had to do with other men saying to me, "You're the man. You're
Suck
the man
it
of
up."
the family."
Big boys don't cry.
Yeah, and that's a disservice we as men do
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
children.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you're all saying find someplace, something.
Find it. Yeah,
Something.
there is outlets out
Yes.
there.
And what works for you, you don't have to go someplace like maybe counseling isn't for you. I've been to hundreds of hours of counseling. There are some people who just don't like that modality, you know, or that doesn't work for them. For me, at a time, that was very important for me to get one-on-one with somebody and dig into it, you know.
And
That
I'm always
worked.
saying, if you don't like your counselor,
Find
find
a new
a
one.
different
Yeah,
one.
that's right.
Like, I feel like when people come to me their first session, it's to find out if I'm a good fit for them.
Yeah.
You know, shop around.
And so we're going to end on that. Shop around, people. Look, you can go to your local hospice. You can go to all sorts of places. And thank you all for being on the
thank
show.
you.
Thank
Give
you
us a
very
quick. You get your Why Suicide at Barnes and Noble.
Why Suicide is available at
Give us your
barnesandnoble.com.
website.
Personalgriefcoach.com.
And where can we find you? Tuesday's Children?
TuesdaysChildren.com.
Great.
.org.
Good. Thanks for watching this show today. And Heidi and I always want to remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours till you find your own, and God bless.